So welcome everybody. I can't believe it's August. So we're going to get started. We have a really short and sweet agenda. I think the first thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the April 27th meeting. They've been circulated in advance of the meeting. Does anyone have any questions on the minutes? Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Thanks, Wayne. And who
Second.
would like to second?
Second.
Mark. Great. So we'll turn the virtual podium over to George Sweeting.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I just want to quickly go through some of the items we've been working on since our last meeting. We've been quite busy, particularly in hiring. We've actually got in the meeting today, two of our most recent hires, Jordan Page, who comes to us from North Carolina. I think most recently he was working in the Winston-Salem budget office. And Julia Conrad, who is a new member of our education team. She actually taught in the city schools for 4 or 5 years before getting her master's at Wagner. So welcome to both of them. In addition to those two, we've filled 3 other positions in the last month or so, including a new assistant director for budget review, which was a challenge for us. We lost a very good colleague there who moved over to the city council. And so that makes 5 hires. And then we have 2 more offers that we expect to extend actually this week. So we've been able to find strong candidates for all of these positions. I'm looking forward to working with all of these new people. Another issue we've been working on is sort of overhauling our IT infrastructure. You may recall that we suffered a email breach back in the late fall, early winter, and it's forced us to continue to upgrade and rethink our infrastructure. And we've actually been working with the Office of Technology Infrastructure in the city. We're designing a permanent, we're trying to design an infrastructure that will support our plan to be permanently hybrid on our work schedule, so that we need a lot of support for remote work and meetings. We've got the first half of that done, but we next face the challenge of moving all of the administrative and research data that we have to the cloud. That will require some work with our partners, our data, the people who supply us with data, where we have MOUs and other types of agreements in terms of protecting the data. We're going to have to work out some issues there. There's another change in the IT infrastructure that you all will notice probably later this week, if all goes well. And that's that we're changing our domain name. The domain is, for IBO currently, it's ibo.nyc.ny.us, which is a mouthful and often conveys to people the sense that we're not part of the city government, even though we are. So we've finally made all the arrangements that we will be able to operate as ibo.nyc.gov. And you'll see that if you use our website or in emails coming from us. That should, if all goes smoothly, happen by the end of this week. We've also been doing some work on our internal processes, particularly around issues of how we do promotions and merit increases, merit raises. There were some issues in terms of sort of standardization and transparency there that we've been working to try to address. We've also been reviewing our recruiting processes, trying to broaden the placement of postings, with a goal of adding to the diversity in the candidate pool. And again, as part of the look at the recruiting process, we realized we actually had quite a wide range of salary ranges that we were offering in our position, in our postings. So we're working on greater consistency and narrower ranges there in order to signal better the level of work the level of experience we're expecting people who apply to come with. We're also working on negotiations for new office space. We're continuing to negotiate with the ownership of some space that I think would really be ideal for us. It's at 80 Pine Street. We're close to an agreement on a term sheet there, but then we'll still have the task of actually negotiating a lease. So that work is progressing, but it's probably still got a ways to go. And then finally, we continue to work on our equity analysis initiative. We have meetings set up in September with relevant staff from the Urban Institute and the New York Fed on their experience in trying to more formally bring into their analysis equity concerns as just part of the routine work of analyzing proposals and pricing out legislative introductions. And that work will go on. We thought that would be a summer project. It's turning into probably a half-year project at least. And we've also continued to put out a number of papers. Some of our most recent publications, obviously we did the executive budget report with the overview and the budget briefs last spring. That was right after our last meeting, I believe. Probably one of the most important pieces we did in the last few months is a review of the Penn Station financing proposal. I think it was undertaken at the request of some of the elected officials in the area, plus also some other advocacy groups. And I think it was sort of typical IBO in that what we focused on was how much of the information that's missing, how much of the information you'd really want to have in order to understand the financing and the likelihood of the financial success of that program. How much of that was missing. And so that was really the main focus of our report. We also did a fiscal brief on the new foster care contracts that ACS is introducing. We also had some smaller pieces, a couple on some of the background about the recently expired 421A program, and an update on school enrollment. Just very briefly, two major pieces that we expect to come out in the next month or so. One is a review of Class 4, that's a property tax Class 4, which is commercial property in the city. The assessment methodology and the disparities in the effective tax rates that result from those some of the issues with the assessment methodologies that the city uses. We also have an explainer piece or background piece on NYCH's Preservation Trust, which is an emerging issue. And finally, I'd like to note that we've been invited a couple times now in recent months to participate with other organizations in some basic research work. One is with CBC, the Citizens Budget Commission has a working group on trying to get a better handle on the data that's behind population estimates for the city, in order to help us have a better sense of, exactly how much has the population been changing over recent years. and also issues around, how much what are the migration flows into and out of the city. So I'm going to be participating in that group. And then the Department of Education has a task force getting underway to take a look at the fair student funding formula. And Sarita Subramanian is, who is the head of our education research group, was asked to participate on that group along with people from DOE and the controller's office, the state control. There are a number of different parties involved in that. And the fair student funding formula is really at the heart of the ongoing debate around the school budgets. And we've been spending an awful lot of time in the last 4 to 6 weeks on this issue around exactly what's going on with the budgets themselves, exactly how much has been how much have they been cut from their prior year, and also if those of you who have been following the news know that there's been a very unusual intervention into the city's budget process by a judge who has raised a lot of questions around exactly what does it mean to have an adopted budget, and what pieces can you change after the budget is adopted, and how do you change them? So we've been doing a lot of work there, and I'd be interested to, if any of the members of the board have any questions or suggestions around work we could be doing there. We've done a lot of sort of background work. We've been answering reporters' questions. We've been answering questions of people involved in the process. We've been trying to provide a basic understanding of what it means to have an adopted budget and what can be changed and how it can be changed. It's been quite interesting. So I don't know, I'd like to sort of invite if people have any suggestions around additional work that you think might be useful to try to explain what's been going on here.
Well, George, the pivot that created this was a pretty unusual thing as it relates to the education, the successor to the Board of Education and its legal authorities, which are not, I don't think that challenge is extant in almost any other part of the government where there's a pre-existing entity that has special rights in state law. So however, whatever triggered that particular set of legal actions, I'm not sure is generally an issue in the rest of the government.
I
Go ahead.
I would agree with you. I mean, I think that's true.
So, it's worthwhile explaining and understanding the nuances of the education governance structure, but there are other issues about amending the budget, and we could always do a look at, how the budget's been amended over the years and by whom and for what reasons and how much and all that. That's all an interesting question generally, but this particular thing, this legal intervention into the budget process, I think is pretty unique to the education system.
That's certainly my conclusion. That you don't have the existence of a state entity, which the PEP is the Panel for Education Policy is actually, I think it's still technically the Board of Ed. Even it's just they're operating under a different name. And one of the questions we've been trying to pin down is exactly at what point in sort of the history of the DOE and its relationship between the city and the state did this 45-day noticing period come into effect? I mean, I believe it was part of the mayoral control legislation back in the early 2000s, in that it didn't exist before, although we're still trying to pin that down. or if there was something equivalent to it in that earlier period.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I'm no lawyer and I would hate to be in the legal abyss here to discuss the niceties of these prehistoric regulatory structures, but I just don't know ultimately how, I mean, the courts will figure it out, whatever they'll solve, they won't, but I just don't know if it has any other general bearing other than, I mean, it's huge, 40% of the city's budget, so it's not like a trivial matter. Education has different rules, but I think a lot of it's in the legal interpretation question.
I would agree with you. I mean, I think, there's, although again, because it's 40% of the budget, the spillover effects are could be quite significant here. If
Well, for example, the property tax resolution has to be fixed again.
yeah,
Right.
If you bring new revenue in, you would have to
rebalance the budget, right?
Right. And it wasn't clear, at least for a few days, while the judge's temporary restraining order was in effect. It had ordered the city schools were allowed to spend up to their 2022 fiscal year budgets, even though the size of the overall size of the city budget was smaller in fiscal year 2023, so that at least eventually you were in a position where you could have been in a position where you would have been spending more money than the total budget authorized. That has been stayed for the moment until August 29th, and we're waiting to see what's going to they'll be back in court on the 29th, and then presumably there'll be some hearings, and a decision would come in very early September. But of course, that's right up against when the schools are going to open. So it's, I mean, for principals trying to put their budgets together, this has been particularly challenging because they were given a set of budget targets that incorporated some reduction in the education budget between fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. Then they were told that they could spend up to the old amounts, which exceeded the current appropriations. And then that temporary restraining order that put that in effect itself has been stayed, so that now you're back to the schools are only supposed to spend up to the 22 amount, up to the 23 amount. And for principals trying to decide how many teachers to have, how many classes to create at each grade level, it must be quite a challenge for them, I would think.
George, Mary Ockham has her hand up.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Mary?
I had heard about some of these cuts being due to decline in enrollments, and
Yeah.
what's the role of enrollments in all that?
They're really central to this. Most of the cuts that have been made are through a formula called fair student funding, which I mentioned earlier, and we're actually somewhat separate from this budgeting question, in participating in a task force that's trying to look at the exactly how effective fair student funding is at driving money to the students with the greatest needs. But so the funding formula tries to identify the particular needs of students and then adjust the per capita amount that goes to the school for dealing with students of particular needs. But the other part of the fair student funding formula is it's driven by enrollment. And so if enrollment is going down, all else equal, the fair student funding formula would presumably result in less money available to that school budget. The enrollment has been declining. We did a piece on the change over the first 2 years of the pandemic, and it's understood that the city is assuming that for the school year that's about to start, that there'll be a further enrollment decline. It's interesting to note that the enrollment declines are not evenly spread across the city. There are school districts where the declines have been quite large, and then there are districts where it hasn't changed that much. And there are even some individual schools that their enrollments are going up. They actually got particularly whiplashed by these court decisions because if you're a school that has increasing enrollment, and the Fair Student Funding formula for fiscal year 2023 would have produced an increase in your budget allocation, you were prevented from spending at that level, at least while that temporary restraining order was in place.
I know why the enrollments are declining because I know that for the colleges, this is the reason why enrollments in college are declining, coming from the schools. But why is that because the population is shrinking, or what's the reason behind schools?
That's a very good question. I think one thing to note is that the school enrollment for New York City anyway had been declining even before the pandemic. What's happened is it's accelerated significantly since the pandemic began. The student population peaked, I believe, at around 2016 or 2017 and had been declining since then. I know, Sarita, is Sarita with us here?
Yeah, I'm here. I think that's right. I don't know the exact year, but it has been declining for several years prior.
And presumably some of that is people, some of that was determined by changes in federal immigration policy, that there were fewer migrants coming into the U.S. and in some cases settling into the city. So that's one thing that's deprived the city of some of the growth. But there's also a fair amount of uncertainty about exactly how much change there's been in the overall city population, and in addition to what's happened at the school level. That's actually one of the reasons I think the work of the CBC working group on just trying to get a better understanding of exactly how the population estimates are done, and exactly how much faith to have in them is going to be interesting work, and that's why we were interested in participating in that, even though it's a little unusual for us to be participating with a group like CBC. But
be good if we do that, George, to see if we can get folks from Census and others involved and people who worked on census.
Yeah.
Part of this is going to be an ACS versus decennial census gap.
Exactly.
He's going to have to be able to unpack that.
Yeah. And Don Boyd, who many of you know, is heading up that project for CBC, and I think those are exactly some of the questions I expect they'll be working on. I mean, if you had been following the ACS is the American Community Survey, which has become the sort of the de facto source for information not just about population but also characteristics of households, income, whatever. That had been showing an annual decline over the last 5 years of from roughly 2015 or 2016 to 2020. Although then when the decennial census came out, it showed a really large increase between 2010 and 2020. The ACS, the American Community Survey, is a sample. It's usually, depending on the version you work with, the accuracy you're willing to accept, it's either a 1% or a 5% sample. No, I'm sorry. It's always 1%. It's either a 1 year or a 5 year average. The decennial is supposed to be a complete enumeration. So it's an interesting question about how the ACS got to the point where they were projecting, or estimates based on the ACS were used to project a steady decline in the city population. And then the full enumeration turns around and sort of reversed that. So,
Yeah, George, to state the obvious, like spending some time with city planning would be really helpful.
I believe they're involved with CBC on this one.
I mean, Joe Salvo, who's retired, would also spend time with you, and he's just like encyclopedic knowledge about population growth and decline.
Yep.
My team would be happy to talk to you. We use census data for our data set. There are lots of challenges in New York City with the problematic nature of the way the census data is collected, and there are lots of populations that don't participate regularly. So there's some challenges in the annual data, and why lots of times people use 5-year estimates, because you miss whole groups of people in the annual collection. If folks don't have other questions, I just want to note that I know all the members of the IBO staff and the members of the board, but if there are other people that have joined us from elected office or press offices, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. This is Alan Swisher from the Queensborough President's Office.
Hi, Alan. And anyone else? Okay, if folks don't have more questions for George, I'm just going to turn our attention to the next agenda item, which is the open meetings law resolutions. And I think, Jackie, would you want to give us a high level overview before we take a vote?
Sure,
Questions?
I would be happy to. This resolution comes about as a result of a change in the law that was in New York State law, passed in April of this year, which is designed to facilitate somewhat limited video conferencing of meetings of public bodies. The amendment to the law gives public bodies discretion to authorize the use of video conferencing moving forward, where a quorum of the public body is physically present in one or more meeting places that are open to the public, and the public is invited to participate physically, to come to those public meeting places for the meeting, and members with extraordinary circumstances who are not necessary for the quorum are able to participate by video conference. The law does not describe or define specifically what constitutes circumstances to justify participating by video conference. We have attempted in these resolutions and the accompanying procedures to define that as broadly as we possibly can. I think we've done so consistent with what some other public bodies have done, so that should the board choose to pass the resolution and implement the procedures, Moving forward, once the governor's emergency declaration expires, we will be able to have a public meeting in one or more physical spaces, as long as we have a quorum present in those spaces. Remaining members of the advisory board with extraordinary circumstances will be able to participate from remote locations. The public will also be able to join remotely. And that is, I think that is a bit of a description of what we'll be able to do. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there a limit on the number of public locations you can have?
There's not, no. As long as they're open to the public, the law doesn't speak to, the law does specifically speak to that you may have one or more public locations. They would be posted, whatever the public locations are, would be posted in the notice for the meeting.
Is there some very simple ritual that you could define where basically wherever an individual board member was located, if you noticed that location and left the door open, that would count as a public location, so that you could literally have a one-for-one if you needed it?
I think part of the goal of the law was to have the quorum be in person. I will certainly look into whether there is a challenge. I don't think on the face of the law there is a maximum number of public spaces defined by the law. So it is theoretically possible.
We don't have an overwhelming number of members of the public seeking to participate in our meetings.
True.
No,
But I think you would have to be prepared to have them show up at your doorstep
Yes.
in that super unusual circumstance that anybody from the public
Indeed.
wanted to show up. Yeah.
Indeed.
And publish the location where you intend to participate from the meeting.
Mhm. Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions, the next step would be for a member to move to adopt the resolutions, and a second member to second.
I'd move their adoption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Thank you.
So we also wanted to just provide a general update on the search. You may recall shortly after our last advisory meeting, the IBO board entered into an agreement with Bridge Partners, which is a national executive search firm, to conduct the search for the IBO director position. They commenced work in May. They've been working to reach a diverse pool of candidates interested in the role. At this point, they've conducted outreach to approximately 150 individuals and conducted initial interviews with roughly 10 people. And the small search committee of the advisory board has been meeting with them regularly. So if there are no questions there, I think, Jackie, we're supposed to go into executive session. Is that correct? Do I need a motion to do that?
You do.
So I need a motion to go into the executive session.
So moved.
Okay, and do I need a second?
Second.
Tony,
Second.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. See you in the executive session. So in terms of public comment, are there any members of the public who wish to speak? No? And do I need a motion to adjourn, Jackie? So I will ask for a motion to adjourn
So moved.
Again,
and a second.
second.
Yeah. Fenwick.
Fenwick, all in favor? All right, have a lovely end of August. We'll be in
Take
touch.
care all. Bye.
Thank you all very much.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.